As we said, the years of conflict have destroyed many of the hopes and dreams of thousands of people who took to the streets in Yemen 7 years ago demanding a better life. That uprising forced President Ali Abdullah Saleh to resign, but hasn't resulted in peace. Let's speak to Andreas Krieg, assistant professor at the Defence Studies Department at King's College, London. He's with us now live from London. Andreas, always good to talk to you. To what extent was Ali Abdullah Saleh, who, let's face it, until his assassination, until he was killed recently, never really went away, to what extent was he Yemen's biggest problem?
Hi. Yeah, I think he was probably one of Yemen's biggest problems, because he kind of caused the situation that in 2011 led people to go on the streets and demand more freedom, to demand more equality, social justice, as well as more freedom of speech. But to be honest, if you look at the situation in 2011, it's almost cynical to say that Yemen has gone anywhere from there since. I mean, to be honest, the situation in 2011 was probably a lot better than it was today. Ali Abdullah Saleh was obviously a repressive leader. He created an authoritarian regime that didn't really cater to the needs of Yemeni people. But people in 2011 were probably better off. Yemen was probably better off in 2011 than it was today. That was not because of Ali Abdullah Saleh alone. I mean, he was someone who played different parties and factions against each other. But his removal kind of removed an anchoring point. It removed an arbitrator within Yemen that kind of kept a very fragile peace. Now, with him removed, everything, all these different smaller conflicts that were contained before have now come to the surface. So yes, he was part of the problem, leading Yemen to the edge of abyss. But then again, he was the one who kind of kept most of these conflicts under a certain threshold. Now, with him removed, we have all these other different power brokers coming back onto the surface and trying to fight for supremacy, which kind of thrown the country into the quagmire that it is today, where Yemen has always been obviously one of the poorest countries in the Arab world, but now Yemen is obviously far worse than that. I mean, it's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, and people are not talking about political freedoms anymore. They're not talking about unemployment alone. They're talking about actually surviving. It's about bare survival, as people are actually trying to cope and struggle to actually, secure food and secure their livelihood within Yemen. And the situation in 2018 now, 7 years after, is a lot worse.
So with no real power broker internally or externally, someone who can, or some thing that can unite Yemen, where does the country go from here? Can Yemen as a nation even survive?
That's a good point. I mean, to be honest, since 2011, people have talked about maybe a federalization of Yemen. The national dialogue was looking at different ways in 2012 to maybe separate the country into different federal blocks that was held together by a central government. Now we don't have a government anymore. Yemen as a sociopolitical entity de facto doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there are different conflicts within the countries. There are different pockets also of stability. But stability in Yemen, if it exists only very much on the local level. So we need to rethink how we look at Yemen. And to be honest, what happened over the last couple of weeks in the south with the southern movement taking action and seizing control over Aden, it seems like they are finally succeeding with succession, which kind of paves the way to a division of Yemen how it was until before 1990. And I do think that this will obviously change everything, because the conflict in the north that Saudi is facing, that Saudi is fighting against the Houthis, is isolated of that. And I think one could potentially create a corridor of stability in the south under Emirati or Transitional Council control, but that doesn't solve the problem of Yemen overall. It will create a corridor in Aden and along the coastline of stability, but it will create other pockets within Yemen where fighting will continue. So, but that might be a step forward. I think at the moment there is no power broker that can unite all Yemenis under one umbrella to say there is a nation of Yemen that will go forward. And you know, the GCC is divided. The United States have kind of given the authority to the UAE and Saudi to deal with it. Both of these, even the UAE and Saudi can't really agree on a common path forward here. So external division, internal division, and I don't see how Yemen as a nation actually will continue to exist.
Andreas, many thanks indeed.